So, given the fact that we only have 20 minutes, let's dig into our first topic here and discuss a little bit the latest trends. And because it's been, if you follow LinkedIn and read some articles, it's been like buzzword bingo at times. AI, RPA, BPaaS, PaaS, BPO, ML, there's a lot of that out there. So what do you guys think about, what's really sticking today? What's really relevant? Is this hype? Let's start with you, Pete. Has this landed yet in the practitioner space, or is it going to be a process of multiple years?
Yeah, I think, this week I was at the vendor event, and they had shown all of these things as a tornado of sorts. And I think that's a good analogy. There's a lot of wind swirling of buzzwords and new things that people are needing to consider in their global payroll, but also their HR environments. But I think for payroll, it gets me excited, and I'm sure it does for you. Thinking back to when I managed payroll, even then we were on the latest version of the latest on-prem solution. This was 10, 15 years ago now or more, and we worked so hard to get payroll out the door every week. I mean, it was a very highly complex payroll environment. But now you're getting so many tools that are coming into play, so many new transformational enablers, as I'll call them, RPA and cloud and analytics and things that are making the payroll manager. I was telling someone this morning when we were looking at all of the softwares that I've seen, the new payroll softwares, the payroll practitioner has so much more control and a view into what's going on than ever before. Right? Before you had to worry about someone giving you a report that you may or may not have been able to even pull if you didn't have IT help. So I think it's coming fast. But it's bringing about change that I think the payroll environment needs badly. It's far behind many of the other processes in automation, and quite frankly hasn't gotten some of the respect I think it really needs in an organization from a transformational perspective. So I think there's a lot coming, and it is swirling, and there are a lot of buzzwords, but as you look at each of those things and you think about your HR and payroll transformation journey, where they fit in at the time that it makes sense for you can really take your HR environment to a whole other and payroll to a lower level.
So Max, from a practitioner perspective, is it buzzword bingo, or
yeah, it's a nice story. But we keep on paying people in the meantime. SaaS was one of those words I think a few years ago, and we all have to move to SaaS nowadays. But we're still running payroll for like 80,000 people on premise, and we're still doing it, I think, flawless. I think a lot of us are still running payroll on premise. It goes well. We pay on time, but it just doesn't fit these current HR trends anymore. But we're a bit lagging, I think, but it's on purpose because nobody's really trying to touch payroll. We try to touch talent and we try to touch performance because it doesn't really affect pay yet. So we think if you look at RPA, I think that's just software improving a process or maybe making it more efficient. I think the only thing that really excites me is machine learning. And I'm actually not a techie, but I think it's a part of artificial intelligence, because if you ask any payroll practitioner with a little bit of experience, you say it's all in his head and he looks at a pay slip or he looks at some payroll data, he knows something's wrong. That's something he knows. But he cannot really tell people why, but he knows. And the Germans, they have a great word for it, it's Fingerspitzengefühl, or savviness, I think the closest one in English. If we really, in a few years' time, can embed that in technology or in machine learning or a bot or whatever you would call it, then I think you would revolutionize payroll. The rest is just running payroll on-prem, running payroll in SaaS. It will change our lives. RPA, it will change our skill set, but it will not revolutionize payroll. I think machine learning is the only thing that will really come in our world that will revolutionize us.
Yeah. And what's so specific about machine learning that it holds that great potential? What do you think?
Well, I think as you start to see RPA being introduced first, right? I did a presentation on this yesterday, and RPA is the first sort of step, I guess you could say, along that spectrum. As you begin to get those things out of your way, where it comes to those low-hanging fruit, I'll call it, the stuff that you're spending hours of your team's time processing or entering data, something that could easily be applied to RPA. You've now freed up all of that time and all of those resources to do other things, and the machine learning to me is definitely only going to boost that. It's only going to make that RPA more intelligent and provide that. Yeah.
Because it speaks all the time about us freeing up time, which is great. But if you ask a payroll practitioner if they ever have time, they rarely say yes. But if they do say yes, then it requires a completely different skill set, because we can free up time. But traditionally, our workforce is really internal, and I'm really an extrovert, but if you talk to most payroll practitioners, they are more introvert. They don't typically want to advise to C-level about payroll data, because now they freed up that time, but they have to do stuff with that time that's really out of their comfort zone. So I think one of the keynotes yesterday was also education and on these type of things, but the whole skill set of us is changing, while we have, with all due respect, kind of a seasoned workforce sometimes in payroll. So I think it's great that we free up time, but how are we going to fill that time with these skill sets that we have currently?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I know we're going to probably talk about this a little bit, but reskilling those employees is going to be key. But I think the machine learning is going to make that RPA more powerful and make you be able to do things better and knock away those. See, I think what HROs are doing right now is they're working hard on addressing the use cases that are going to make the most impact right away for their customers, right? And so, I've listened to some of the examples, and they're really solving some problems with RPA that are moving a lot of just unnecessary work off of the team to be able to do some of those things, to get time to reskill, to be able to focus on more analytical type work and analyzing what's going on and helping add value back to the business.
But on RPA, Pete, isn't it in payroll so that typically it's still an attended bot instead of an unattended bot?
Yeah, it absolutely is attended at this point. I think it's going to stay that way for a while. Just the complexity to me and the severity of payroll. Like I was telling someone this once recently. All of this software and all of this tech, all of this talent management stuff that we're doing is all very important. It's critical for most businesses, if not all businesses. But the reality of it is if you don't pay these people on time correctly every time, forget it. It doesn't matter how fancy your front end was. It doesn't matter how happy they were to join your organization, how great your culture is. Payroll is where all of that's the vehicle for all of that delivery, and so it's got to be right every time.
I just wanted to pick up on one thing which actually came through in one of your statements here, Pete. You spoke about the HROs. Is the adoption, or the rapid adoption of new technologies, is that a case in favor of outsourcing or against it? And let me explain to you why I asked the question. You could actually argue, on the one hand, the HROs whose core business it is to outsource will actually do everything to drive transformation and innovation there. On the flip side of it, technology becomes so easy to consume that you can argue, why don't I do it myself? And if I have a little bit of scale, I don't need to go anywhere. I just consume and I source it directly from the market. What's the dynamic here?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think for an organization the size of Shell, they likely have operations on par with many of the HROs in terms of the volume and the output and the complexity and the environment. They probably can, a large market customer could probably make a case to develop RPA on their own, particularly if they've already done it somewhere in their other core business area and brought it into the back office. But the reality of it is most companies are not the size, and most companies don't have that volume. They don't have the data, and they don't have the funding to really make a case for for a high impact RPA model. This is where I think HRO is really in a position to do well and really take off even more, is because they're already invested in this stuff. They're already figuring out what works and what doesn't work. They've gone through all of that trial and error. They've spent the money on the innovation. They've partnered with the right platforms, and they have it fine-tuned. And all a customer has to do is really plug into that versus having to kind of create that. So I think it's a great enabler for HRO, for customers to consider HRO now, because you can get some of these service enabling tools that you might not otherwise get on your own quickly in a fashion that's already been vetted, if you will. So.
And what you see with organizations, they have center of excellences, and typically there was a regulatory center of excellence or maybe a project center of excellence next to operations, but now you see like a robotic center of excellences that really drive that robotics. So you do see that at larger organizations.
Yeah.
Good. Just picking up and changing topics a little bit. We've been spending some time on technology now, moving into people, and I think we've touched on people already briefly. Max, you just reminded me when we spoke this morning about the fact that you got people in your payroll team working who have spent more time in payroll than you have spent time on Earth, basically, than you're older than, who can actually remind you of how payroll went in 1973.
Yes. Your point is?
My point is, people who spend a long time doing something may get a little bit stuck in their ways, and now we see a big tsunami of innovation coming up. How are you going to deal with that? How can you enable and prepare an organization for adoption of these things?
Yeah.
And what was the other example you gave? some of these people run a payroll flawlessly, but they struggle with their iPhone.
Yeah, exactly. They look at their iPhone like, oh, and I try to call them. They say, oh, I left it at home. You know, I left my phone at home. And, you know, you wouldn't think of leaving your phone at home. You would even drive back and text that you're late and get your phone. But some of those seasoned payroll professionals, they can do without a phone. So convincing them to bring in RPA it's a lot of fear. And I'm not just talking about my team, but a lot of people I've spoken to. It's fear of your job. But that's consistent. I think the last 10, 15 years you've seen automation, then we've seen workflows and employee self-service, manager self-service. We wouldn't be needed anymore. We're still around, we're still doing our payrolls. So I think taking away that fear is step number one, and then embracing the challenge, because also retirement ages are going up, not only in NL, I think across the world, so people will still...
Except in Italy.
Except in Italy.
They're going down.
Okay. There's still a benefit against it? Or? But typically people work longer, so they have to work differently. But I think taking away the fear is step number one. And step number two is accepting the challenge of changing your skill set, because they can do a lot more than they can think. You know, they wouldn't expect running payroll in a SaaS system with an RPA. I know people who are in late 50s who are attending bots. They say, oh, it's just some code, or it's just teaching a bot what I know, and they kind of feel proud of the bot working. So I think it's not too difficult. It's the same change journey we've been in years before, taking away the fear step.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a perfect answer. Not a lot to add to that, but I would say that I think that understanding that human intelligence will never, or excuse me, emotional intelligence will never be replaced by a bot, I don't think. I mean, there's something about that, particularly with something so sensitive and so complicated and so important as payroll. I think attended is where we're going to stay for a while. Will we get to unattended? I think you can for the smaller, less complex payroll maybe runs that you do. But to your point, I think the reskilling is going to be important. But I think fundamentally payroll practitioners and payroll experts that have been in the industry for a long time are going to take some pride, to your point, in managing a virtual worker and managing a virtual process, and they are the expert. The bot is still learning, and it's going to need to learn for a time. So I think there's a great deal of opportunity for people to cross over and have this sort of symbiotic environment where you're operating with bots and people and mix, and that's going to be a balance per company. Not everyone is going to be able to go fully autonomous with anything. They're going to have to ease into that and adopt the amount of change, if you will, and enabling change that makes sense to that environment, I think. Yeah.
So where do you, fast forward 10 years from now, suppose we're doing this conversation again in 10 years, where do you think payroll professionals will be at that point? Will they have reskilled into compliance gurus or more into technology specialists and kind of taming a herd of bots?
I think payroll will never be revolutionized. I think payroll will always be in evolution. So I think we will still be here. We would have adopted RPA without calling it RPA anymore. It's just a simplified process, I think. It will not have changed. I hope that the call to action to education providers that I think is around the whole unleash here is we see a lot of education, also in NL, but also globally, it focuses on an operating model, legislative changes, keeping up to date. But I hope we have educated ourselves to understand our data, because I think you talk about machine learning, RPA, what else do we have for acronyms? Internet of Things. It's all about data, and I think a lot of vendors or analysts, for that matter, they want us to be having a seat at the table. I still don't know what table. I think a round table is a good start, but I'm not sure if we should ever have a seat at the table. But understanding our data, I think I posted something on LinkedIn this morning. Really understanding where our data sits, where it will be in the future, and what our data can bring in value into the organization. I think hopefully in 10 years' time, we would have figured it out like 2 to 3 years' time, and then all those tools that people want us to use that we can actually use by understanding our data.
One last question I want to ask before I start asking the audience for questions is, you make a passionate plea for integrating HR data with payroll data and bringing that all together. Whereas in the past, in a lot of organizations, those were run separately, right? And you had payroll data, you had HR data, and sometimes it was crossover, but most of the time there was clear accountability. Why do you plead for that integration?
I think how rich our payroll data set might be, it's never good on its own. If you ask an HR director, it needs not only payroll cost at a certain element or let's say only time, but it needs attrition, it needs talent profiles, it needs performance, it needs business outcomes, it needs maybe even in our stock market, what does it do if we emerge into a new market. Our data set alone is never enough to be a real data set for a key senior business leader. But I think what we've not been doing very well, of course some have, most not I think, is explaining to HR directors or HR analytics teams or finance teams what kind of data we have, and then letting them use it with our payroll brand on. And I think that's the first thing. But us feeding into that instead of only a consolidated amount in a GL, which basically says nothing. But we should not overestimate our data, but we should also not underestimate our data.
Good. Any perspectives from your end?
Not exactly. I mean, not much more than that. I mean, that's a really good answer. I think that I would just say that I think right now with analytics coming into play, personally, I think that historically HR and payroll data has been some of the most misunderstood and underutilized, just flatly not used. So I think it's creating a tremendous opportunity for the organization and even for payroll to bring their data to light and say, you know, there's a lot here we can help the business do something with. And so I think that's just, it's at their fingertips now where they're able to really be able to do that. And the integration is absolutely critical. As you're building these ecosystems, you know, when you walk around, you know, integration and APIs have made it to where an organization can really, I was describing it like an iPhone, right? If we all pulled our iPhones out and we laid them on the table, they might all be the same iPhone, but none of them are identical in terms of how we've laid out our apps and the way that we like to use it. And I think you're seeing more organizations take that model of plugging in the pieces that make the most sense for their ecosystem. And that integration is absolutely vital to moving the data back and forth seamlessly and keeping the user experience clean so that they don't feel they're dealing with all of these different apps and systems. But the power of that data is probably only being, it's tip of the iceberg right now. I think there's a lot of opportunity for payroll to be powered with that. So.
For instance, yesterday I had to approve my payroll because I'm still a payroll manager, so I still had to push a button. I think my colleagues in Analyst will thank me for that. But I had to do it once I was at home. I had to log into my laptop, I had to log into various systems, do all checks and balances, my checklist, all the reports are done, all the controls are done. I would like to just take a moment here at Unleash and half an hour and, you know, run my analytics on my tools. I know some vendors are probably jumping on me now, but I know it's somewhere out there, but probably not maybe robust enough, or I get a notification your payroll's waiting, these are your reports. It's on my Apple Watch maybe, or maybe even I'm thinking of approving my payroll and it already transmits something to my iPhone.
That's a nice way of doing a fast forward.
But I think the reality still is that a lot of people go into their systems and approve their payroll at some point. I think hopefully in the end it will be just me 15 minutes at Unleash. I need to approve payroll, I need to pay 10,000 or 80,000 people.
You could do it from stage.
Yeah, why not?
10 years from now. I think that paints a really interesting vision for the future. So thank you both. The applause in the adjacent rooms is the best timekeeper, because I think we heard an applause on our left and on our right. So with that, I'd like to thank my two guests.
Thank you.
And Matt.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.